But at this point, I do want to turn over to our audience Q&A. We have some really thoughtful submissions here, and I want to make sure we get to them. And so perhaps, and this is open to either one of you. Perhaps, Kim, you could take a shot at this one first. If not, Bambi, feel free. When does the FDA decide that the draft is complete for implementation when it invites input from the field experts?
Okay, so there is a standard process for guidances. Most guidances, when the draft is published, there is normally a 60 or 90-day official window for comments, and that date is published when the guidance is released. So normally that's the end. Sometimes there are petitions by stakeholder groups to say, this is a really meaty guidance. You need to extend this. We need more time to get these comments. So then you might see a publication of adding an additional few months with there. So that closes. And then based on FDA's workload and prioritization, they work then on finalizing the guidance. They consider the comments, determine what's going to happen. So you can imagine in a year when there are a lot of draft guidances published, they're going to have to prioritize which ones to go first, and that can be subjective to try and decide what to prioritize. But so then a final guidance is published, so and there'll be a notice of that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Okay, we have another question that is asking, are interacts back on track now? Our experience is it was denied, so we ended up getting EU advice on non-clinical development and used the pre-IND later. And I'd open that up to either one of you.
So there's two things with Interact. There's two things that they back on track. So not every product that requests an Interact will be granted an Interact, because FDA determines if they think you are at the right, the Goldilocks moment of, are you at the right stage of development for an Interact discussion? So you can't have progressed too far in your non-clinical studies, and you also can't be too early that you don't have any proof of concept data yet. So there are criteria that FDA evaluates. Are you at the right time? Another aspect of that question might be, has FDA caught up with their workload before a while, probably before Interacts were finalized and a time frame, was assigned to the Interact meetings. There was quite a backlog that people would be saying, we will give you an Interact meeting, but we can't get to it for another 6 months or longer. So I think for the most part, that has eliminated. There is a specific time frame of holding those meetings. I think it's 75 days. From being granted. So I think FDA is generally on track with their timelines, but I did notice a trend in the fall with several of the folks that I consult for, that FDA was granting meetings, but they may not quite be meeting the timeline, the PDUFA timeline of holding a type B in 60 days or an Interact or whatever, things in 75 days. So that can be a trade-off. So that's something to plan for too. FDA may grant your meeting, but it may not be in the time frame that you had originally, that they're supposed to be held to.
Thank you. Okay. Before we move on, I just want to see if Bambi, if you want to add anything on, or we can move on to the next question.
The only thing I have to add on is I think the key there is the Goldilocks moment that Kim mentioned, because I have worked with quite a few small companies who have filed for Interacts, and it's been denied because they're generally considered to be too far advanced. And so what I would say is, actually in November, I was working with the first company where I've done this, and they actually got accepted to have an Interact meeting. So from my perspective, it looks like they're getting on track with having these meetings, but maybe we're just absolutely in the right spot there.
Okay. All right, next up, what is your opinion on the use of the term critical component by FDA and challenges in interpreting which materials should be manufactured in accordance with US GMP, or a risk-based approach to identifying the quality measures pertinent to each material?
So for those that aren't familiar, FDA can use the term critical component for things like lentiviral vector in a CAR T product, or it could be some of the gene editing components in a gene edited cell product. When they feel that it is critical to the very much have strict control of that component, but yet technically, according to FDA's regulations, they can't call it a drug substance. So that's why that term has been used. I agree that there the field would benefit from more clarity from FDA as to where the GMP line starts, where, and not just for critical components, but for other things like multi-tiered banks, et cetera. I would actually like to see guidance in that area, you know, for banks, for critical components, where does CGMP start? Because that can be a big hiccup that I have personal experience with. I can't get into the details for, I'm sorry.
Sure, of course. I think we have time for one more question before we have to wrap up. What are the panelists' thoughts about regulatory issues and challenges for in vivo CAR T cell therapies, and how does that contrast with ex vivo CAR T cell therapies?
The in vivo CARs, this is such a very interesting area, and it could, you know, if these products develop and get to approval, I mean, this is, you know, might alleviate some of the things we were talking about earlier, patient access, you know, being able to take these therapies, you know, to not only be at academic hospitals. So some of the regulatory challenges are just the fact that, you know, the transduction, the cells becoming CAR T cells is happening in vivo, and how do you characterize that? How does, you know, instead of just waiting for the clinical outcome, you know, it's like hard for regulators to get their minds around, like, how do we know that, you know, what is your rate of transduction? You know, are these cells, you know, are these cells becoming CAR Ts, and characterizing there? So I think there's some regulatory challenges there, but I know, you know, definitely, you know, some of these products are progressing toward the clinic, and it's going to be a very fascinating area.
Certainly. And Bambi, before we wrap up, I want to give you the chance.
Yeah, I agree with Kim about that. I think that the most interesting part of this is the significantly different risk profile that we'll see with this, because this is really different technology, and it goes back to what I said in the beginning, which is, you know, this field has been driven a lot by missteps, and if this can't be properly controlled or vetted, this is where we could see something really big happen. So hopefully none of that happens. Hopefully this all goes smoothly. I absolutely agree with Kim. This is exactly the kind of innovation we need to increase access for patients. So I think it's great stuff. I just think that this is an area that is a little bit of a minefield, and I'm really interested to see how it goes.